My name is Chiara, and 3 years ago I bought a country house that seemed perfect to me. It was located in a quiet area close to the stunning ski slopes. This corner, hidden from the hustle and bustle, became a real refuge for me, so peaceful and serene that in the evenings I sat for a long time by the window, watching the setting sun paint the peaks in purple-pink shades. The location was perfect, as I work remotely as an application developer, and to be honest, I'm not exactly a sociable butterfly. I'm more of a person who feels comfortable alone with a laptop and a cup of strong coffee than in the cycle of conversations and parties. I was always quiet when I was a kid. While the other children were running around the yard, shouting commands to each other and arguing over another game, I was sitting in the shade of a tree with a book in my hands, hiding from the sun and prying eyes. My older brother Bernardo was a sports star, a winner of school tournaments, and a favorite of the teachers. He married his high school sweetheart Fina. They have two children, Vico, who is only 1.5 years old, and Cosima, who recently turned 6. My younger sister Daphne was popular, she was always surrounded by friends, and now, having married her college boyfriend Leon, she is raising 4-year-old Ilaria, an amazingly lively and talkative girl. My parents are both retired now, but they're still trying to manage each other's lives, just like they did when they were kids, when they thought they knew better. As soon as I told my family about my new home one day, I immediately noticed something light up in their eyes, and almost immediately regretted sharing this news. I should have known where this would lead. A house near the ski slopes is ideal. You should have Christmas this year, Mom said, clapping her hands as if she had just solved a serious government problem. I do not know, I drawled, fiddling with my coffee mug. He's not that big, and I'm not really ready. For entertaining nonsense, Dad intervened, waving him off. It will be useful for you to have company. You spend too much time alone with your computer. Bernardo nodded. The kids would love to go skiing. Come on, Chiara, this is going to be fun. For several weeks, I hesitated, weighing the pros and cons. But in the end, I thought it was just one time, and maybe having one Christmas wouldn't be so bad. Maybe it's even a good idea to have a house full of people at least once. As the holiday approached, I worked overtime, rushing to close projects before deadlines. The holiday season is actually one of the busiest periods, as all customers strive to have their apps ready for the December rush with phone gifts and millions of downloads. The closer the holiday got, the more clearly I realized that I would not have time to prepare a huge treat, which my mother would surely be waiting for. On the eve of the family's arrival, after agonizing thoughts, I called the best local restaurant and ordered their holiday package. Turkey, ham, side dishes, desserts, a complete set, put together with such care that it cost a fortune. But I decided it was a reasonable price to pay to avoid the stress of cooking and still finish the job. When my family finally pulled up to my house, it looked like a circus performance. The clown's car opened the doors, and out, one by one, children, bags, gifts, ski equipment, some bags of toys, and even a rocking chair that Mom had brought with her for some reason began to jump out. The noise, the hubbub, the patter of tiny boots on my wooden floor merged into a single cacophony, which instantly caused alarm to flare up somewhere on the edge of my consciousness. Mom rushed to me and hugged me tightly. "Oh, Chiara, this place is great. I can't believe you're living here all alone." I was already beginning to smile back, even though an introverted alarm was stubbornly ringing in my head, demanding rescue. "Thanks, Mom, let me show you around." The tour took only 5 minutes. It was not a mansion, but a modest 3-room apartment. I converted one bedroom into my office, so most of the family had to make do with air mattresses and pull-out sofas. "Where's the Christmas dinner?" Mom asked, peeking into my small kitchen, as if looking for traces of the holiday fuss there. "Don't tell me you haven't started cooking yet." "Actually, I ordered everything at the restaurant. They'll be here tomorrow morning," I explained, trying to keep my voice steady. Mom's face stretched out so dramatically that it seemed if a theater critic had been there. he would have immediately presented her with an award. Eating at a restaurant for Christmas. Mom, I was overwhelmed with work. I didn't have time. She shook her head, as if I had just announced the complete and unconditional cancellation of the holiday. A good hostess would have found the time, Mom said peremptorily, interrupting my excuses, her lips pursed into a thin, determined line. I felt a familiar wave of irritation touch my throat, but I restrained myself. There was no point in arguing with her. For as long as I can remember, she has always treated my career with barely concealed condescension. For her, app development was something like a hobby, fun for adult children sitting in their pajamas in front of screens, rather than a real job that required effort, time, and nerves. When I hosted the guests for Christmas, I started preparing a few days in advance. I bit my tongue, remembering how last year I tried to explain my workload to her, but of course, it didn't make any impression. Mom just shrugged her shoulders, saying that everyone has their own worries, but a real housewife must find the strength for culinary feats. However, contrary to her expectations and preconceptions, last year's Christmas dinner went better than I could have hoped. Despite her dissatisfaction with the food from the restaurant, everyone seemed to enjoy everything. After dinner, we exchanged gifts. I spent more than one sleepless night in advance, choosing something truly special for everyone. The latest game system for Bernardo, a designer handbag for Fina, a collection of illustrations for Daphne and Leon, carefully selected toys for children, and a weekend trip for parents. In return, I received a scarf from Daphne, socks from Bernardo and Fina, and a coffee mug from my parents with the inscription, "The best aunt in the world." We all contributed together, Mom explained, handing it over with a solemn smile. We thought it would be more meaningful. I smiled, thanked them, and even tried to convince myself that there really was something to it. Of course, if you don't think about the fact that the total cost of their gifts hardly reached the amount that I spent on at least one of them. But I reminded myself that that wasn't the point of Christmas. The days after the holiday merged into one murky canvas of noise and commotion. The house was bursting at the seams from the screeching of the children, who turned it into a private playground. They ran up and down the stairs, spilled juices and milk on the carpets, and left toys where they could only step on them barefoot. The adults went skiing in the afternoon, returned with rosy cheeks, demanded dinner and hot chocolate, which I regularly served. All this time, I continued to pay endless bills from the restaurant, dutifully ordering new dishes so that no one would go hungry. No one ever offered to help, either with the table or with the dishes, which piled up in the sink, threatening to collapse. The bathrooms were littered with wet towels thrown on the floor, but no one seemed to notice, or he just didn't consider it necessary to pay attention. Every night I waited until they finally fell asleep, and only then I quietly wandered around the house, cleaning up the consequences of their daily exploits. Otherwise, I could only go crazy. "Chiara, we're out of coffee," Bernardo reminded me one morning, looking into my office when I was trying to carve out at least an hour for work. "There's a grocery store 10 minutes away," I said without looking up from the screen. "Well, we don't know the area," he complained, "and we're all going skiing." I looked up at him, standing there in the new ski pants I'd given him for Christmas. "I'll go get some coffee when I finish this section," I promised. "We wanted to have coffee before we went," he insisted. I sighed, closed my laptop, and went to change clothes. As a result, I went to the store while the others were happily busy getting ready for their next day of fun. I spent New Year's Eve exhausted, with my job a week behind schedule and my bank account starting to show alarming numbers. Feeding 9 people restaurant food every day turned out to be a much more ruinous undertaking than I expected. "It was so wonderful," Mom said dreamily as we clinked glasses to the sound of the chimes. "We should do this every year." I almost choked on the champagne. And the next morning, while I was standing in the kitchen trying to get my thoughts in order, they packed up and left. None of them made the bed, did not wash the dishes, did not put things neatly. They hugged me, thanked me for everything, waved from the doorway, and disappeared out the door, leaving me alone with a house that looked like a tornado had swept through it. The year flew by unnoticed. There was enough work, I didn't have to be bored, and I enjoyed the peace and quiet of my home again. Sometimes Mom and Dad called on holidays, on birthdays, with short questions and stories, but they didn't mention Christmas anymore, which fed me a timid hope that this crazy holiday would remain an isolated event. That hope was dashed in an instant, exactly 2 weeks before Christmas, when the phone rang and I heard my mother's familiar voice, unusually cheerful, almost jubilant. "We will all come to you for Christmas this year." My stomach immediately tightened. I opened my mouth to protest, but before I could say a word, Mom had already hung up. I spent the next few days weighing my options. But in the end, I did what I always did. I started preparing for their arrival. Belatedly realizing that resistance was futile, I reluctantly cleared my schedule as much as possible, postponed all urgent tasks, went to the online store and made an order for groceries, filling the refrigerator to capacity, and began mentally preparing for another week of chaos. I imagined in advance how my quiet, cozy house would be filled with loud voices, children's laughter, slamming doors, and endless requests again. I tried to convince myself that I could handle it, that maybe this time everything would be a little easier, calmer. But I wasn't ready for what happened next. The message arrived early in the morning, when I was just sitting at my computer with a mug of hot coffee, hoping to be able to finish at least one task before lunch. "We just left, we'll be ready for dinner," read a cheerful text from Mom. I almost poured the coffee right on the keyboard, rereading the message over and over again as if it might have changed. I immediately called my mom and tried to find out if this was a mistake or a joke. But no. "The kids graduated earlier than expected," she explained cheerfully, as if she were telling me good news, "and everyone managed to get more free time at work. Imagine what a stroke of luck." When I tried to remind her that I wasn't expecting them until the 23rd, she laughed. "Chiara, this is a wonderful surprise. Isn't it great?" "Of course it's great, wonderful, just a dream." 7 hours later, the driveway was clogged with cars again, and the crowds crossed my threshold, noisy, agitated, with suitcases, bags, and boxes in their hands. Mom, as always, rushed in first. Hugging me as she walked, she looked around in surprise. "Have you decorated the house yet?" "I was planning to do this on the weekend. After all, you were expected only next week." Mom just waved me off, as if I'd said something insignificant. "It's good that we arrived early, we'll help." This help consisted of my mother sitting on the sofa with a cup of tea, giving me instructions on where to hang garlands and put candles, while the children were already settling in, scattering toys and board games on the newly cleaned floor. Less than an hour later, my mother informed me, "There's nothing to eat in the house." I reminded them that I had expected them to arrive only in a week and had not had time to prepare. I offered to cook something if they would give me some time. But no. "Let's order something like last year from that expensive restaurant." Knowing it was useless to argue, I silently handed her the credit card. "Only the essentials, Mom. I've already spent a lot this month." She patted me on the cheek, as she did when I was a kid, when I tried to object to her about dessert before dinner. "Don't worry about money during the holidays, dear. Family is the most important thing." 2 hours later, Mom returned with packages from the gourmet branch of the nearest supermarket. Ready meals, 3 expensive bottles of wine, and a receipt that made me want to lie down and put something cold to my heart. "Mom, this is clearly too much." "When I'm on vacation, I like to enjoy myself," she waved it off. "You can never relax at home, all the time caring, cooking, cleaning." It was Christmas morning. Suppressing the remnants of common sense, I ordered a festive lunch at the restaurant again. This time, the menu turned out to be even more expensive. Prices had increased compared to last year, but I just nodded to the courier and, hypnotized, signed the receipt. watching my family enthusiastically pounce on the food, how the children's eyes light up, how my mother pours herself a glass of wine with pleasure, it was almost worth all this effort. Almost. After dinner, it was time to exchange gifts. Once again, I thought everything through in advance. I listened to Bernardo's casual wishes, and I ordered the drone he dreamed of for him. I chose luxurious designer winter boots for Fina. Daphne got a spa package at one of the best centers. Leon got an expensive watch. I bought the children exactly the toys that they enthusiastically talked about via video call back in the fall. And she presented her parents with a certificate for a weekend in a fashionable mountain resort, where they can finally relax as they dreamed. When it was my turn to open the gift, I was handed a medium-sized box. Of course, I immediately smiled to hide the slight tension. There was a coffee maker inside. Usual. There are hundreds of them on the shelves of any department store. There was still a half-erased price tag at the bottom of the box. We all chipped in, Daphne said proudly. You love coffee so much. I smiled again. She thanked him. I restrained myself from saying that I already have a great coffee maker, which they enthusiastically used all week, or that the cost of this gift was hardly even a tenth of what I had invested in their joy. But well, I thought, putting the box on the floor, it's Christmas. While everyone was relaxing in the living room, immersed in lazy bliss after dinner, I found myself cleaning the kitchen alone. The sink was filled with piles of dishes covered with dried remnants of sauces and gravies, and the countertops were strewn with grease stains, crumbs, and traces of overturned glasses. I methodically washed the plates, wiped the surfaces, focusing on the movements, trying not to think about the fact that I was back in the role of a maid in my own house. The minutes turned into an hour, and I washed, scrubbed, and put everything in its place, until finally Daphne floated into the kitchen doorway with almost theatrical grace, holding an empty glass in her hand. This place is a mess, she remarked, glancing around the kitchen, where I was barely managing to clean up the aftermath of their celebration. Yes, I agreed, seizing the moment for a subtle hint, hoping that she might take the initiative and offer help. But instead, she filled her glass with a serene smile and added, Mom asks if there's any chocolate cake left from yesterday. I wiped my hands on a kitchen towel, slowly turned to her and said, Daphne, could you help me with these dishes? There are too many of them, and I've been cleaning up after them all week by myself. She frowned at me, as if I had just suggested that she go outside and start shoveling snow. Really, I'm on vacation, Chiara. The kids are finally settled and we're watching a movie. I'm on vacation too, or at least it should have been, I pointed out, unable to contain myself. But I worked, cleaned, and paid for it all nonstop. Daphne rolled her eyes, and there was something icy in her voice. You can't expect the guests to clean up. I can expect the family to participate, I retorted, especially when they invited themselves. Her face immediately changed. The smile disappeared, replaced by a stern line of lips. I'm going to get my mom. A few minutes later, the two of them returned, both with expressions of indignation, as if I had violated some unspoken agreement. Mom sided with Daphne, firmly stating that they had come to rest, not to work. We're not going to clean up during the holidays, she said with the same intonation she usually uses to announce something indisputable. If you don't like having guests, maybe you shouldn't have invited us at all. From that moment on, I counted down the days, and closer to the new year, it was already hours before they left. But I was not destined to wait quietly for that either. At dinner, Dad raised his glass and with a satisfied smile, as if announcing a long-awaited toast, said, We've been thinking. We all like it here so much that we decided to stay for 2 more weeks. We took an extra vacation and agreed to work. I froze. This isn't what we planned, I said slowly, trying to keep my voice steady. I have a job and deadlines. Mom just waved her hand condescendingly. Come on, Chiara, Be glad that your family is with you longer. Come on, your games and apps aren't going anywhere. The 2 extra weeks turned into a real nightmare. With renewed insistence, Mom demanded money for groceries, justifying herself by saying that since they were on vacation, they should eat really well. Dad disappeared on the slopes in the morning, returning home only for dinner and bedtime. Bernardo and Daphne remembered less and less that they even had children. Cosima and Vico were bored. They started acting up, throwing tantrums, disrupting important calls to me. I tried unsuccessfully to explain to my family that I needed time and quiet to work, but they still looked at my case as a trivial hobby that could be postponed. If someone suddenly needed a warm blanket, advice on choosing a wine, or an urgent search for a missing toy. On a particularly stressful day, when deadlines were on the rise and the mail was bursting with messages, my boss called me. Chiara, is everything okay? You don't respond to emails and the client starts to worry. I held the phone to my ear and hid in the bathroom, the only quiet place in the house. I'm sorry, Jack, have arisen, family circumstances. I understand, it happens, but the project needs attention. Can you get back to work by Friday? Yes, I promise, I lied, knowing full well what that meant. Sleepless nights after the whole circus had settled down. Later, I sat down at my computer in the office, tired, but determined to get at least a little ahead. I had barely opened the necessary files when I heard the door click. I turned around, and Vico was standing in front of me. He walked over to the table, leaned on the edge, and looked at the screen. Can we play a game? What is it? He asked, already reaching for the mouse. No, I replied more sharply than I had planned, jumping up from my chair. This is my work computer. There are important files here. At that moment, Cosima appeared in the doorway. She pressed her palms to her chest and said with feigned sadness, "But we're bored." Where are your parents? I asked, trying my best to contain the irritation that seemed to have accumulated in every muscle of my body. Mom, find something quiet to do, Vico replied, without taking his eyes off my screen, as if he still hoped that I would change my mind and let him press at least some button. I took a deep breath, trying to stay calm, even though my patience was bursting at the seams. This is not a place for games, Vico. Please find your mom and tell her that you need to be looked after. Reluctantly, with painful sighs, they finally left, quietly closing the door behind them. I leaned on the table, ran my hands over my face, and barely had time to get back to work when, just 15 minutes later, there was a loud, insistent knock on the door. When I opened it, I found Daphne standing on the doorstep with both children, who now looked unhappy and sullen. They said you yelled at them, she accused from the doorway, looking at me as if I'd bitten them and not just asked them to leave the office. I didn't scream, I said slowly, trying to keep my voice steady. I just told them that they can't play with my work computer. All my projects are there. If they accidentally delete something or download a virus, I will lose weeks of work. Daphne rolled her eyes, as if I'd just told her that I'd had to postpone knitting because of the whims of the guests. You're being dramatic. They just wanted to play a game. So set up a game for them in the living room, I suggested, feeling my blood boil. Or take them outside. Or just take care of them, instead of sending them to me while I'm working. Daphne's face hardened, her lips pressed into a straight line. You know, Chiara, that's why you're alone. You have no idea what it's like to be a parent. We can't just lock ourselves in when it gets uncomfortable. No, you're just dumping your kids on other people and calling it a vacation, I blurted out before I could stop myself. Daphne's mouth dropped open in mute amazement, as if I had inflicted a personal insult on her that would be remembered in family circles for another 20 years. Well, just well, she said finally, turning on her heel and leading the children away. I knew that this conversation would come back to me. I knew that I would pay for these words and the resentment that I had just caused. But at that moment, I was too tired and exhausted to care about it. Of course, everything became very clear at dinner. Daphne didn't miss the chance, apparently, to share the whole story with the others. There was a tense silence at the table, interrupted only by the clink of cutlery. And so Mom broke it first. Chiara, Daphne told us what you said to her today. I think you should apologize to her. She's trying really hard, she's a mother, she works around the clock, and you tell her she can't handle it. That's not what I said, I interrupted, barely able to contain my voice. I said she shouldn't expect me to look after her kids while I'm working. You don't understand what it's like to be a parent, Daphne said reproachfully, clasping her hands on her chest. You have no responsibilities other than yourself. I slowly looked around the table, meeting the gaze of each of them. Mom, Dad, Bernardo, Fina, everyone avoided my gaze, pretending to be suddenly extremely busy with their plates. No one took my side. Nobody. No responsibilities, I asked, and my voice sounded especially quiet against the background of silence. I'm in charge of this house, for his career, and apparently for feeding, accommodating, and cleaning up after all of you for a month without the slightest help. Oh, there's that poor me routine again, Daphne drawled, putting her fingers in ostentatious quotation marks. You're just angry because you're alone. Silence, again. This time it was muffled and heavy, as if the air in the room had become thicker. I looked at her, then at my parents, hoping that at least someone would come between us, say a word. But no one said anything. You're right, I finally said. I do not know what it is like to be a parent. But you also don't know what it's like to have your house invaded for a month, when they expect you to pay for everything, clean up after everyone, entertain everyone, and be grateful at the same time. When your work is considered a toy that can be neglected. I got up from the table. I'm going to work. There are leftovers in the fridge. If anyone gets hungry, figure it out for yourself. I spent the whole evening in my office, fenced off not only by the door but also by a wall of silence. Behind her, I could hear the distant sounds of TV, laughter, and conversations that I deliberately ignored. Part of me, of course, longed to join in, to give in to the general joy, to return to the role of a kind aunt, a cheerful sister who easily lets go of resentments. But the other part. The other part was just counting the days, hours, minutes, until the moment when this endless vacation would end, and I would finally be alone in my house. When it finally came to an end, and they filled the cars, loading suitcases, bags, and children's backpacks, I stood on the porch and watched them say goodbye one by one. Relief and sadness mingled in his chest. They were still a family, no matter what. It was wonderful, Chiara, Mom said, giving me a final hug. Although, honestly, you could have been more hospitable. We're all a little disappointed with the way you've been acting. I pulled away, stunned, disappointed with myself. Well, yeah, relationship, complaints about cleaning, unwillingness to spend time with children. It all came together in their eyes in one picture, cold, tired, unhappy, unwilling to join in the family fun. And that old record started playing again. We're a family, Chiara. The family supports each other. I opened my mouth to protest, but closed it again. What's the point? They'll never see my side anyway. They will never understand that support is not about turning one person into a free service staff. Have a nice trip home, was all I said as they loaded up the cars. I didn't wave goodbye, she didn't run out after him, she didn't cry like in the movies. I just went back inside, closed the door, and leaned back against it. Silence. A clear, transparent, ringing silence. Even the ticking of the clock in the kitchen suddenly became clearly audible. I stood there for a few minutes, absorbing this calmness, as if hoping to lose myself in it and erase the last weeks from my memory. Life without family dramas turned out to be sweet. My job was thriving, and I got a promotion worthy of respect and a good raise. I woke up again without the screams of the children, without the fuss in the kitchen, without wet towels on the floor. In the evenings, I brewed coffee in my perfect coffee maker, the one that I supposedly needed so much, since it was given to me for Christmas, and looked out the window at the snow-capped peaks, hearing nothing but the crackle of wood in the fireplace. Everything finally fell into place. But 2 months before Christmas, when I really believed that this peace would last forever, my social media notifications started exploding. I opened the app and froze. My sister Daphne posted photos of her children skiing with the caption, "Getting ready for our annual Christmas ski trip to Aunt Chiara's." My heart started pounding faster. With each scroll of the comments, it became clear. Not only the closest relatives were planning their invasion again, but also distant, barely familiar people. I can't wait to join this year. Leave a place for us. The best Christmas tradition. I gritted my teeth and immediately dialed my mom's number. "Mom, we need to talk about Christmas," I began as soon as she answered. "Oh, Chiara, I was just going to call you," she interrupted me enthusiastically. "I have such wonderful news. Everyone was so excited about last year that I mentioned it at your cousin Jen's wedding. Now the whole family wants to come. Can you imagine? And Uncle Steve and Aunt Laura and their children and Grandma Betty and your cousins on your father's side. About 20 people. Isn't that wonderful?" I opened my mouth to say that this was crazy, but before I could, Mom had already hung up. I was left sitting with my phone in my hands, dumbfounded, devastated, and to be honest, angry to the core. Silently, without hesitation, I opened a social network and wrote, "The official announcement: I'm not hosting anyone at my house this Christmas. I repeat, no one, please make other plans, good luck and good luck to all." I clicked publish, turned off my phone and went for a long walk along the snow-covered paths, trying to cool my head, nourish myself with fresh air and tranquility, which I obviously have to gain for the future. But when I returned and looked at the phone again, a new surprise awaited me. No flurry of outraged messages, no apologies or even surprise, only comments with funny emoticons. Haha, classic. "Oh Meg, you're such a joker. We look forward to December." They thought it was a joke, that I'm once again pretending to be grumpy, but of course, deep down, I dream of welcoming them all, feeding them, and settling them down. That's when I made my decision. If they don't understand my words, let them taste my actions. I went to the store and bought food and drinks so that I could stay at home for the rest of the holidays without even going out the door. Then I contacted the security company. After a couple of days, cameras were installed around the perimeter of the house. I warned the neighbors not to be surprised by the number of cars and the possible commotion on my porch, and I stayed waiting. And so, exactly 1 week before Christmas, the driveway was filled with cars. A real caravan, family minivans and SUVs stopped one after another, loaded with suitcases, gift boxes, and ski equipment. Through the cameras, I watched as my parents, brothers, sisters, their children, and distant relatives, whose faces I barely remembered, poured out of them. Everyone was excited, bustling, waving their arms, as if they had arrived at a grand resort. They went to the door and rang the bell. I didn't answer, they knocked louder, I was silent. Then the phone rang, it was Dad. "Chiara, we're all here, open it." "No," I replied calmly. "I've told you several times that I'm not hosting Christmas. You chose not to listen." I hung up and turned off the sound. Through the cameras, I watched as the family huddled on the porch, huddling against the cold. Mom was gesturing furiously, no doubt discussing my unacceptable behavior. Daphne was whispering to the children, who were beginning to whimper. Bernardo pounded on the door impatiently, and the doorbell rang nonstop for 20 minutes straight. And I was sitting in an armchair with a cup of hot coffee, wrapped in a soft blanket, and listening to how the house was finally really quiet. Then I saw something that made me immediately grab my phone. On the camera screen, children were making snowballs and enthusiastically, screeching, throwing them right at my windows. White lumps hit the glass with a thud, spreading out in wet circles, leaving streaks on the glass, and I, sitting in the silence of my living room, felt like a thin but strong thread of patience had finally snapped. I quickly dialed Dafin. "Tell your kids to stop throwing things at my house. Right now," I said, without greeting, without unnecessary words, feeling my voice become cold, honed like a knife blade. "They're just playing," she snapped, letting out an exasperated sob. "If you'd let us in, this wouldn't be happening." "I have cameras. Video surveillance captures everything," I interrupted her in a harsh tone. "If they break the window, I will report the damage to the police." I hung up the phone without waiting for an answer. After a few minutes, the adults finally caught themselves, fussed, and stopped the children, but the general mood among them was clearly heating up. The screams became louder, more indignant, and someone gesticulated towards the windows, as if trying to persuade me to come out and talk like normal people. Soon I saw Mr. Malapart coming from the next yard, an elderly man with a straight back and a leisurely gait, whom I had always respected for his restraint and prudence. He stopped by my family and talked to them, calmly but firmly. A few minutes later, my phone rang. "Chiara, this is Mr. Malapart. Your family says you locked them up. Everything is fine." "Yes, Mr. Malapart. I've told them several times not to come. They ignored my requests. I won't let them in." "I understand," he said slowly. "But they're making a big mess here. If they don't calm down or leave, I'm afraid I'll have to call the police." "I understand. Thanks for letting me know." After hanging up, I turned up the volume on the security system and heard Mr. Malapart telling our family the contents of our conversation. "This is private property. If Chiara doesn't want to let you in, that's her right. You are disturbing the order in the area. I suggest you all find another place before the police get involved." Through the camera lens, I could see confusion on the faces of the family, turning into disbelief. They seemed to be unable to believe that their grandiose plan could fail, that the scenario in which they break into my house and turn it into a noisy boarding house is suddenly cancelled, and not by their decision. After a heated discussion involving all the adults, they finally began to pack back into their cars. But the consequences were not long in coming. The very next morning, Daphne posted a long, tearful video on social media where she told how cruel sister Chiara abandoned her family at Christmas, left poor children to freeze in the street, deprived everyone of festive warmth and comfort. She skillfully chose her words, emphasizing children, traditions, and family values, portraying me as a cold, soulless hermit who valued her computer more than her family. My social media feed was filled with angry comments, from relatives, from classmates I hadn't spoken to since graduation, from people who had heard enough of the story to write me off as selfish and a traitor to family ties. But I didn't reply to any of the messages. She didn't try to explain, justify, or defend herself. They've never listened to me before, why did they have to start now? Instead, I invited a few close friends, people who truly appreciated silence, respected boundaries, and were able to enjoy simple things. We cooked dinner together, laughed, played board games, exchanged modest gifts, and never once, not a single word, mentioned my family drama. It was the most peaceful, calm, and sincere Christmas in many years. And then came months of silence. My phone was silent as if it had become an unnecessary object. Mom didn't call me for my birthday. I haven't received a single message from my siblings telling me how their children are growing up, what progress they are making, what new words Vico has learned, what Cosima is painting. No invitations to family gatherings. I became a black sheep, the one they whisper about behind my back, remembering how she kicked us all out. An abusive daughter who turned her back on tradition and her roots. And to be honest, that was exactly what I wanted. Maybe one day they'll understand. They will understand that borders are not whims, but a necessity. That family is about respect, not a free hotel service in which one person serves everyone else. Maybe it will come out that selfishness was not on my side at all in this story. But even if that day never comes, I'll still be fine. Because I did the most important thing, I stood up for myself. And it was worth much more than any family approval. Now my house was mine again. My time was mine again. My life has become mine again. Write a comment on what you think about this story And don't forget to subscribe to the channel and like it. See you soon.